in the interest of transparency, so everyone can hear, I'm asking the board members and anyone else that's at the dais that wants to speak to please use the microphones. Tonight, this is another in a series of meetings which will take place. We're at the beginning of a process, and basically tonight's agenda will be as follows. First, we'll have a report from the ad hoc members. The ad hoc committee is made up of Mr. Cooper and Mr. DePremio from Castaic Lake Water Agency, Mr. Mortensen and Ms. Goodsite from Newhall County Water District. They've been meeting and come to principles of agreement, basically some guiding principles. If we are going to get to a deal, we want to follow these guiding principles. The essence of those guiding principles are take a leadership role in creating a long-term integrated water resource strategy for the Santa Cruz Valley, value an inclusive, open, and transparent public process for water management, make ratepayer value and multiple stakeholder benefits a priority. This one's important. Listen to each other, work collaboratively, and seek to understand opinions, especially opposing points of view. And finally, identify and prioritize issues which are important and worthy to address first. Many of you have been coming to these meetings right along. One of the previous meetings, we asked the public for what they felt were the priorities. And those priorities came out to be water supply, finances, and governance structure. So this is the meeting on governance structure. And the process we're going to go through, the ad hoc committee is going to give us an update on where they are. Then we're going to have a governance analysis report by Mr. Doug Johnson from NDC. He'll give a PowerPoint presentation. Then we're going to have a call for public comment, and then we'll follow that with board discussion. And finally, if you would like to make a comment, be sure to get that comment card over to us so we can hear from you. This is your time to comment. We want to hear what's important to you. If that wasn't true, we wouldn't be meeting like this. So it's now your chance. Okay, with that, I'm going to call for the report from the ad hoc members, and that would be Maria first. Ms. Maria Goodsite, Vice Chair, Newhall County Water District. Go ahead, please.
All right, thank you everyone for coming. You might notice we have a little bit of a different format tonight, and I think it's good because you probably have not even heard directly from the ad hoc committee. And I wanted to run through real quickly some points that have been, that we're aware of that the public has not been aware of. We met to just explore this concept through 2015, and I can tell you for more than half the year, I pretty much expected every single meeting to be the last meeting that we had. But we did find some common ground, and that was the deal that if we could find common ground, then we would explore further with the public. Some of the key points that we wanted to do was have an agency, if we do this, have an agency that brings the best from each individual water district to a new agency. Have elected representation throughout the valley. Do not share debt burdens of the current agencies with other service areas. Create a more transparent and open budgeting and rate setting process. And consider some innovative budget things along with that, including things like a ratepayer advocate, and also bring in elected representatives by district, which is not the case now. A lot of people have asked, have we already decided? One of the key things that we wanted to do was bring this public early before we've decided. So these have been these type of meetings where we're still gathering the information, and tonight's presentation is the first that all but the ad hoc has heard of this governance concept, and there'll be more coming on the finance side, but we're just rolling this out. We have done polling that shows Nearly 80% of the community is in support of a new agency if it brings in the best elements of each of their current water providers. And they also, 80% support a directly elected board. As mentioned, we're going to focus on governance tonight and finances coming up in the future, but I wanted to also right now clear up some myths that have been out there in the public. Perhaps we should have done a better job on outreach. We have been trying, but I think there's been a lot of myths floating around that get some more traction than the actual truth of where we're at. First of all, this is not a takeover of Newhall County Water District. 14 of our 15 board members have agreed only to explore the option of forming a new agency, but 4/5 of the Newhall board is in favor of it, and all of the Castaic board members are in favor of these discussions. So it's not an adverse takeover. Some people have said this is done solely for Newhall Ranch. Newhall Ranch is really irrelevant to these discussions. Newhall Ranch and all other growth in this valley is planned through the urban water management planning process and has long been anticipated, and that document, which by the way there's another meeting on Wednesday on the urban water management plan, is really the place where we ensure that we have adequate water for future growth and make our growth projections. This has really nothing to do with Newhall Ranch at all. And the last thing, as I've said, people are saying, well, the process is complete. We've already decided. The process is far from complete, and this is actually only the second big chunk of information that all of our board members are getting. There'll be another informational meeting on the finances, and then several meetings on legislation and other steps that we will need down the road. So really, we're looking at months and months to go. So that is a high-level overview of the ad hoc, and I invite my other ad hoc members to, if they have any specific comments to add.
Very briefly, I would dovetail onto that the questions and concerns that we hear from our ratepayers are, I think, precisely the questions and concerns that Maria and I had and carried into this process, and which we believed could never be addressed and would doom any such talks to failure and ultimately being a waste of time. And I think a work with you collaboratively, cooperatively, and honestly attitude from Bob DePremio and Bill Cooper, where we would say, listen, this is a deal breaker, you know, and I can't imagine there's anything that you guys would be willing to do about this, so I think, you know, we're just dead in the water. They would say, well, we'll figure something out to accommodate, and they would come back and say, you know, what if we did this? Would that resolve your questions? And over a period of time and a lot of discussion and a great deal of mental energy by all parties, we reached deeper and deeper and deeper levels of agreement, and ultimately it looked to Director Gutzeit and I as though there was a significantly better place on the graph that we could move to by working collaboratively. And I am a Newhall ratepayer. I buy water at 3 locations in Newhall. I want nothing but the best for Newhall ratepayers. I can promise you that, and it is my considered opinion that Director Gutzeit feels exactly the same way. So we are doing our level best to figure out how we can help our ratepayers, how we can get their rates down, how we can focus on long-term reliability, interconnection, other issues, how we can maintain a voice in a larger organization. We've attacked all of those issues. You'll hear more about that as time comes on, and I urge you to not come in with a closed mind, to just listen and think about the possibility that the place we occupy is not the highest and best possible place we could occupy. That's all. Just have a mind that is open to that possibility, and I think you will learn a lot. With that, I'll turn it over to Bill Cooper.
You know, like Maria, when we first started this process out and we had our early meetings, there was a lot of distrust on both sides. And the meetings were at times difficult, testy. But over time, we started to understand each other, and we started to build that relationship that and that trust that goes along with we're both here for the same reason, and the same reason is for the community. It has nothing to do with Castaic Lake Water Agency and Newhall County Water District. It's all about the community as a whole. And when I look at this, and I may back up a little bit, but this is we hear those stories, oh, it's a done deal. Well, it's not. It's an investigative process. And we're looking at all of the ins and outs. We have the attorneys with us in the meetings to help us along with some of those things and those issues. But it's just a process at this point, and it hasn't been completely decided. But if we look at the community, I've lived out here. I moved out here in 1972, and I've seen our community evolve. Now we have a city. City's about 25 years old, I think, now. Before we had Canyon Country and Saugus and Newhall and Valencia and all of these areas. Well, this is very similar to that. It's bringing all of the areas together with the idea that was put together with the ad hoc committee of water resource management. It's all about managing the resources for this valley. You can try and do it separately, but that's not always effective. We've evolved as a city, and it's time to evolve as a complete community and put together one organization that manages all of our water resources. It's not efficient to operate 4 different water companies. If you look at it, each of them has their own billing department, their own water quality department, their own engineering departments, their own management. We're not sure that that's not efficient for a community of our size to have all of those different organizations doing the same thing for the same resource, which is in the ground here and is imported in. We're all trying to manage the same amount of water, and we think that there's better ways to do that. And it's not Newhall County taking over, and it's not Castaic Lake Water Agency looking to take over. It's forming a complete new water agency that would manage the water resources in the valley. So I really appreciate working with the Newhall County people. I think that we've built some very good inroads into old problems that we've had, and I think that we can move on past those things, and I think that we can help the community and build a good agency that will help manage this valley. Thanks.
It is important for those of us in the water community to be sure that we're protecting ratepayers, not only now, but 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now. And we've got an edict from our governor that says, you are to integrate projects. We're not able to do that right now effectively. And if we were able to get to a new agency with new management and doing business in a different way, I think you would start to see economies of scale, start to see far more efficiency exhibited and demonstrated through the operation of water resource management, period. And that's what we're shooting for. In order to start the process, we need to look at governance. How do we structure this? How does one go about dividing up the Santa Cruz Valley in an appropriate fashion so that the electorate is properly represented? And to that end, the ad hoc hired a man named Doug Johnson that I'm going to have Mr. Cooper introduce now.
Mr. Johnson, who's going up to the podium right now, is National Demographics Corporation, and they did College of the Canyons. That's where he was recommended to us from, as the Board of Trustees at the college, and helping to put together the demographics to look at districting valley-wide to meet the needs. As a part of this, we're looking at, you've got two boards that are coming together, and our goal was, let's not cut people out of this. Let's not, people have been elected by the public in their areas, is let's bring the best, let's bring the boards together, let's form those districts, and then let's put our heads together, and at some point, then we can start reducing the size of that board. We're hoping down the road, and not sure what final number that we would come up with, but we see some opportunities to be able to reduce the size over a period of years. But our goal was not to cut anybody out that's been elected at this point. Working with Mr. Johnson, you know, early on, I tried to put some maps together and looking at how it would work in the valley. Mr. Johnson has a fantastic computer program that is amazing and can tell you how many voters there are in every block and what the populations are, and so it was a very good process in bringing him in. And with that, I'll let Mr. Johnson go ahead and show us what he has tonight.
Thank you very much, and it is indeed a pleasure to be with you this evening. This is certainly an interesting project. Our firm, we've been doing this kind of work of drawing election boundaries and redrawing them since 1979. We've worked with, I would say over 150, but I think we're getting close to 200 jurisdictions of drawing the lines. And normally it's school districts or cities or water districts that are doing the process and are under fairly strict rules from the state on how to go through the process. This is a little bit different in that it's bringing two entities together. There's some more flexibility, but there are still some tricky rules and unique elements of the valley as well that we need to take into consideration. So, let's see. Oops, there we go. So, first of all, obviously you have the 15 board members. One consideration: one board member doesn't live in the territory that would be involved, but is appointed. So we're really looking at 14 board members who would be elected by this new system. The additional board member can stay on or not stay on, and under the current system, however you decide to structure the agreement. So as I talk through this, I'm only looking at the issues of the directors who live in this area and would need to be elected by the divisions that we're going to talk about. A couple of things to note in particular. For the New Hall board members who currently are elected in odd years, regardless of whether this merger goes forward or not, those board members will need to change their election year because the state has decided that essentially to do away with odd year elections. If you have really high turnout in your odd year elections, you can keep them. But so far, when we're looking at only places like City of Industry and City of Vernon that have 9 voters and 26 voters get enough turnout. So essentially the state has mandated just about everybody to move to even year elections. So moving to even year elections is not part of the merger, but would happen either way. But that's why when I talk about the 2018 and 2020 elections, the New Hall 2017 board members would move to a 2018 election, and the 2019 New Hall board members would move to 2020. One note about that I add on here, just so it's in writing. As some of the school districts discovered a couple of years ago, LA County is running out of space on their voter cards. And so they are not allowing some people to move. So in 2020, they have to allow it by this new state law. They may or may not allow it in 2018. But we're assuming they will, given they have reversed course on all the ones that they turned down a couple of years ago. So I put this map of current territories in here just for reference. This is something the board members no doubt know very well. The public may or may not know. And then we've got the current divisions. This is for obviously Castaic. New Hall, as was mentioned, elects at large, but would be moving to by division elections as well. These are the current divisions, but there is a concern, rather than just go forward with just these, is that they're, as you know, there's been a lot of activity surrounding the California Voting Rights Act in the school districts, in the college district, in the city. And it's all centered around two neighborhoods. There's kind of New Hall, Old New Hall, it has different names. Right along New Hall, there's a relatively concentrated pocket of Latinos. And then in Canyon Country as well. I do want to be clear when I talk about a pocket of Latinos, this isn't like what we run into in the Central Valley, where you have literally one side of the railroad tracks in some towns is almost entirely Anglo and the other side is entirely Latino. The whole valley is relatively integrated compared to many parts of the state. But these are the two neighborhoods that have driven the challenges to the school districts, to the college, to the city. And this move is complicated enough. You probably would be wise to avoid getting caught up in those issues surrounding the California Voting Rights Act. The other piece of that is that because of the challenges to the local other jurisdictions, you have plaintiffs that the lawyers have found and that are ready to sue. So it's kind of an easy pickings for them to go after other jurisdictions. And we do find that in lots of places where when they sue one jurisdiction, they sue every jurisdiction that the plaintiff lives in once they find someone willing to go to court. So one of our recommendations is to put those two areas together. You're still not getting a 50% Latino seat or anything like that. You're actually getting a 27% of the eligible voters would be Latino. So it's nothing like a majority Latino seat we see elsewhere. But just in an abundance of caution, we do recommend putting those two areas together, which means shifting the current Castaic director divisions. Other factors, as was mentioned, is how many directors over time and as a result from how many seats. As we talk through this, it does seem to make sense to go with 3. The key thing is that there does have to be an equal population, and it's total population using the most recent census. So an equal population per director. So there are a few jurisdictions that have 3 members from one division or trustee area, because they're usually schools, and 1 or 2 from another. But then you get different populations because you have to have an equal number of population per director, and that gets very complicated. And voters start asking lots of questions about what's going on. So where we've come down is to try to get 2 directors per division per election year. So there'll be 2 elected well, it may not happen, it may not get down that low in 2018. But eventually, as you go through cycles, each division would have 2 directors up each year. In part of that transition, this is where things really can get complicated, you can write into legislation or whatever vehicle you're using, keeping some at-large directors. Obviously, you have some now in Castaic, and the whole New Hall board is at-large for New Hall right now. You can write it so that continues. The catch is that any at-large directors could attract attention of these California Voting Rights Act plaintiffs. So if you have, any at-large elected directors, they can challenge you and put you in a legal bind. So if you do keep any at-large directors, we do recommend you keep them briefly as needed and get into pure by divisions as quickly as possible. The one thing you'll have to wrestle with, as I just hinted at, is changing in the number of directors. One thing to keep in mind with that is that the divisions we're talking about in a minute will need to be redrawn in 2021. So I mentioned you have to have an equal population using the latest census numbers. So in 2020, there will be a new census taken by the federal government. That data will become available in 2021. So it's a little odd in that there's a year delay from when they count to when they release the data. and then the new divisions would be drawn in time to use them for your 2022 elections. So that may figure in as well as a time to adjust the numbers or change, or for the board at that time to revisit the question of how many directors to have. And then obviously, as I mentioned, the status of the appointed director for County Water District 36 is separate from this issue, and essentially just take the number of directors we're looking at by division and add one for as long as you keep that director, or for forever if you decide to keep them forever. So there's two maps to show you. And this is the first one, map 1. Both of them are fairly compact, but a couple of criteria that we look at. So we're looking at, as I mentioned, equal population. That is a harsh taskmaster to get those equal numbers, because we have a very small margin. We're allowed about 5% plus or minus per division. So we try to follow major roads, we try to follow community borders as much as possible, but there will always be some notches in some places where we have to move the line just to balance the numbers. And you can see that to some degree in this map. You really get Division 1 is really that Old Newhall and Canyon Country area that I talked about, trying to keep them together. And I realize this isn't all of Canyon Country. There are areas to the north that are in Division 2 here that probably describe themselves as Canyon Country. But we're looking at those two neighborhoods that have driven those lawsuits and getting them together. Then that picks up areas over by the 5 freeway and south of the 14 to the east in order to get to equal population numbers. Then we get a northern Division 2. Obviously fast growing areas, lots of new population up there. And talking about 25 years ago and how we've changed, the numbers up there in Division 2, there's the same population as in Division 1 on this map. Whereas 25 years ago, obviously, it would have been a very different story. We come over here just so people know the kind of notch there where we're balancing population. I'm trying to stick to major roads as much as I can. Where it comes down, it's coming down and then turning east along Copper Hill. Then obviously it goes down to Seco Canyon Drive that you can see on there, and then it comes back across on, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but Decorro, thank you. And then down on Dickinson Drive there. So that's that notch there. So they are fair, they're not highways, but they're relatively large roads that we're trying to follow. And then 3, in order to show more detail, I'm zooming in. Obviously, the rest of the territory to the north and west is included in 3. It gets Castaic, comes down Newhall Ranch Road, and then gets everything west of I-5, and then comes across really to the just west of Old Newhall there, following the main border. As you go down here is let me see here, Valley to Maple, and then it jogs over a little bit to Wildwood Motorway. Oh, and this is the kind of curve at the bottom of the bump is McBean. So we're following major roads. Obviously not perfectly compact, but it gets there. Over on the left, you can see the breakdown of directors. The bold and italic are up in 2018. The regular font are up in 2020. So you can see Division 1. We got 3 that are in the 2018 cycle, and 2 that are in 2020 cycle. So in either 2018 or 2022, whenever we decide to change the numbers, that would need to come down to just 2 that are in that cycle. Division 2, same thing. We get 3 that are in the 2018 cycle, only 1 that's in the 2020 cycle. And then Division 3 is the reverse. 2, which is our goal for the 2018 cycle, but we have 3 for the 2020 cycle. And the big difference, I almost missed the big difference. The big difference between the maps in terms of the Newhall board is that in map 1, 2 of the Newhall members are in Division 1 and 2 of them are in Division 3. Given where the Castaic members are, since they're already elected by division, that separated them out, many of them, and they end up more of a mix. But the Newhall directors are 2 in 1 and 2 in 3. Map 2, by contrast, puts all the Newhall board members in Division 3. So the territory up in Castaic that's currently in Newhall, the territory farther south that's currently in Newhall, all four would keep, oh, sorry, thank you. Thank you. In map 2, those areas would all be united in Division 3, and they would essentially keep the voters that they've known for a longer time. Not huge changes in this map, as you can tell. A little bit of difference in the border between 2 and 3. We're actually using the LA Aqueduct. Flip this so I get my notes. Down to Copper Hill, and then coming across Copper Hill to McBean. So this one's a little more compact as well. Same thing down south, in the border between 1 and 3, 5 down to McBean again. And then coming across, and then the next jog is at Lyons, over to Newhall Avenue. And essentially in Canyon Country, it's the same border, essentially the same border in both maps. This one, again, when we're looking at directors, this one we get a bit of a better spread. In Division 1, we have 2 and 2, so we're already at that target split. In Division 2, we'd have 3 directors up in the 2018 cycle. And I say cycle because, again, the number could go down to 2 in 2018 or 2022. 2 members in 2020, so we're good there. And then in Division 3, again, we got 3 directors up in 2018 and 2 up in 2020. So there are a lot of moving pieces with this. A lot of discussion. Obviously, I'm happy to discuss the details of the maps, where the lines are, or how any of this would work, but it's a bit of an introduction of the many moving pieces in question here. So, well,
Very much, Mr. Johnson. Thank you. Okay. First, we'll hear from Mr. Cooper, and then we're going to open it to public comment. Go ahead.
In map 2, this one, I think, really had some benefits to it. One is that the population in each of those divisions, amazingly, keeping to the main streets like Mr. Johnson did, in Division 1, it was 88,440 people. In Division 2, it's 88,550. And in Division 3, 88,772. You're within 200 population in each one of those, which is amazing to get it that close, because Castaic, we've done, since we were in divisions all these years, after censuses, we would have to adjust our boundaries, and that was very difficult. And this really came in very close. Another advantage to this, and it was pointed out by Director Gutzeit, is that the 4 current Newhall County Water District directors would be in the same division down in the Newhall area, up through Stevenson Ranch. They would take in Castaic, the town of Castaic, which they currently have, as well as Newhall, and they would also take in Tesoro, which they currently have right now as well. So that really is their territory, along with Stevenson Ranch and West Ridge and those communities. The only thing that's different is they wouldn't have the Pine Tree area clear out in the east end. So this one, and the people know them in those communities. So there was some real advantages to this. So I was really pleased the way the numbers came out. I think Mr. Johnson did a terrific job in putting this one together.
Thank you. Any other board discussion? Okay, we're going to move to public comment. If you haven't not already gotten one of these, they're on the back table. It's a very nice synopsis of what we're trying to accomplish here. It's pretty well written and thought out. So please avail yourselves of that, because it will capture on one page, front and back, what we're trying to accomplish. To be consistent, we've got several comment cards. I'm going to ask ladies first. 3-minute time limit, so please be concise. It's a little 10 after 7 or so. We've got until 1 in the morning. No, I'm kidding. Basically, we've only got 4 or 5 comment cards. If you would like to comment, please see the ladies at the table here. They'll take your comment card and make sure that you have a chance to speak. We would like to hear from you. What you've been presented is what we're trying to consider. If you have concerns, now is your time. Do you have anything you'd like to add, Mr. Campbell?
No, that's good.
Okay. All right, so the first comment card would be Ms. Joan Dunn. And I think, April, you're the one keeping the time, right? Okay, go ahead.
Well, good evening. I've been following water for at least 25 years plus. I have felt very close to the Newhall County Water District. I have been on their board. Ed has been on their board. That's my husband. He's been on the board at CLWA. And we have watched, and I've been going through tons of material about articles, how bad the governance was in Castaic Lake Water Agency's agency, how there were so many different things that they were doing. They were pandering to the developers, one in particular. And then if they didn't like something, if they didn't like a law, they would go and change it, or they would work around it, or they'd get a legislator to change the law. I am concerned about that behavior from the Castaic Lake Water Agency. And to be part of that, this little water company, which we feel like it's our baby, is going to go into this. This is very upsetting to both my husband and myself. Now, there's some issues here with Tesoro, the way that Newhall has handled the water, that they are only getting state water. We share it, the prices of it, with all of us, with the groundwater. But at Tesoro, if Tesoro is left out, Tesoro is going to get high charges for their water. Secondly, there's some questionable areas in Santa Clarita, in Newhall in particular, that Santa Clarita Water Division has, and it has very poor infrastructure. We have been upgrading all of ours. We don't want to be part of that, because who's going to pay that? Who's going to take care of that problem? We have upgraded our systems. We have upgraded GIS. We have mapping. We have been doing all of these things that are very responsible items that we have been doing. And the schools are independent, and they do have independent principals, et cetera, and that gives the neighborhoods control of those school districts. If you are all together, we'll never have a control. And I remember running candidates for at-large positions. It was impossible to get anybody on the at-large because it was so expensive to do that. And so, therefore, I am not for at-large positions. Also, the poll was inaccurate. There weren't that many people from the Newhall County Water District that said they didn't even talk to that many people. Is that
That's your time.
a warning? Okay, thank you.
Thank you
And
very much.
monopolies are no good.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Ms. Cam Noltmeyer. I am. Thank you.
Cam Noltmeyer. I'm a Valencia ratepayer. CLWA purchased the Valencia company, and we just had them, they being Valencia, wanted a rate increase, a revenue adjustment surcharge. They set a public hearing for June 2nd at 6 o'clock. They canceled it on June 1st at 4:45 p.m. That's how considerate they are of the ratepayers. The CLWA owns the stock. I just received how much us ratepayers are paying you, CLWA, for a stock dividend 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016 to date. It is $2,796,430. A little about, like, you might as well say $2,800,000. That's what we have benefited from being any part of CLWA. To say we want to see any more mergers? No. I'd like to see Valencia be independent with a separate voted board so we could find out what they are. They don't even know what they are, whether they're public or private. That's the games you allow being played. There was a special meeting of the CLWA board with the Finance and Administrative Committee. Facility capacity fees beginning in 2013 was depleted, actually depleted. Since then, and they're unable to pay future users, the developers, debt services. So 1% of their property tax revenue is paying it for them. Interfund loans, kind of Enron type of bookkeeping going on. Current balance of the borrowing and interest is over 51 million. With the current 8-year capital improvement program you have and 10-year forecast, the interfund loan will be up to 88 million. I gave you a copy of that. Any Newhall board members that go forward with this, as far as I'm concerned, they should have an immediate recall brought against them. There has been nothing beneficial from the Santa Clarita Water Company, the Valencia Company, which you own, both of them, one way or another. So don't say there is a problem with merging things. You could have done 3 of them already.
Thank you. Yes.
Well,
Go ahead.
To Ms. Noltemeyer's comment, I think it's important for you to understand that Valencia Water Company has always been a private company, and you've always paid a profit to someone. The only difference is now that profit reduces the cost of your wholesalers, which is a benefit to you instead of going to a private company. That is a difference. That is a benefit, and you make it sound as though it didn't pay a profit to anyone prior to the acquisition, which is patently false. Now it pays a profit to your wholesaler, which reduces your costs.
All right. So here, what we'd like, we're focusing on governance, so please direct your comments at the governance presentation that was made, please, as opposed to miscellaneous comments. We'll now hear from, in order, Mr. Ed Dunn, then Alan Cameron, then Roy Thune.
Mr. Mortensen, that money is being paid to the CLWA, and there's nobody that knows how to squander it better. So that's the explanation for Ms. Cam Noltemeyer. Bigger isn't better. I've been reading documents from both federal government and even state government. They have a purpose for wanting small districts. That's why the school districts, there's so many of them. They have better control. The public has better control. And the 11 directors that the CLWA has became 11 by trickery. You started out with 7. Then it was nice to appoint one from each one of the water purveyors, so that brought it to 11. Then you start purchasing the purveyors, but you don't drop the position. You go to Sacramento and get it changed at large. So you wind up with 11 board members. Now you want 15. No one would ever, no private individual could ever try to get on your board. And you know, we've even read documents that says this is why this is done. So many of you are from a metropolitan water district and you're trying to make this look like an MWD. We don't want to listen to governance, so we haven't wanted to listen to all these dog and pony shows you're putting on. Some people said they weren't going to show up tonight. They're going to boycott it. No point in coming and wasting all their time. I wouldn't have come except I wanted to tape it so I'd have it for those that may want it. Our tapes do get around, and they get around the state, and they get into some pretty good offices. And these tapes will go there too. We are not going to stop with this thing. Newhall County Water should remember that we remain as it is, and you'd be better off setting up Valencia Water Company as a district and Santa Clarita as a water district, and it'd be like your school districts to be better local control. CLWA should keep its nose clean and be a wholesale-only water supplier from the state like they were designed to be. And then what did you do? And it was mentioned earlier about when you'd break a law, you'd go up and get the law changed so that you could do the law. That's the only reason that you can serve retail water in the Santa Clarita Water Company. And that's the only place you can serve it, yet you go and buy the Valencia Water Company anyway. The laws or rules don't mean anything to you people. It bothers me that Newhall County would even think of getting involved with the Castaic Lake Water Agency. The Castaic Lake Water Agency needs the state to come in and take over and clean you out and drop you back to, they say 5 members are the best, and we know it works very well in Newhall County. You don't even need 7. That's what needs to happen here. I don't want to hear any of this stuff that you're talking about, or your governance, and the thousands you're spending to these consultants to do this. If you want to do this kind of study, do it later, but let the individual districts and the water companies do their own work. They do it best. They're doing it better than you people have ever done it. And I think you should let them do it. Drop this business of going to absorb, merge, or whatever, and leave Newhall County Water District alone. Because if you don't do that, we're going to start forming another special district. We're allowed to do that as individuals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Mr. Cameron, you have 3 minutes. Mr. Thune, did you just want the question answered, or would you prefer to speak? I'll make it brief. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Cameron. You have 3 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. A governance question that I submitted earlier is, this is a project under CEQA, and I'm wondering if the governing agencies who are leading this endeavor will recognize that and perform a CEQA determination. There is no avoiding that. The involvement of Los Angeles County District Waterworks District number 36 remains ill-defined. They would have to be part of this unification if it is to function as a unified entity. In terms of leadership and voting, as I mentioned before, the resources are now fully committed to place this concept before the voters that you mentioned. The only question for these people sitting here tonight, will you exert leadership over that process, or will you be led by that process? Those are indeed the choices that you have. I may be a little bit unique in this room in that I played a determinative role in the formation of 4 cities, the most prominent being Santa Clarita, but I also had the privilege of working with the incorporation of Diamond Bar, Malibu, and Calabasas, and the sadly failed cities of Hacienda Heights and East Los Angeles. And there's a fact about districts. In all 10 of the last cities to form in Los Angeles County, the issue of shall we have districts or shall we have all the people who are governed be able to vote for all who govern? And in all 10 of those cities where, well, I'll give Santa Clarita as the best known example for those in this room, the issue of districts or at large was almost as vociferously debated a topic as whether there should or should not be a city itself. And Santa Clarita, as the other 9 cities that formed in Los Angeles County, all chose to be voted at large because of the advantages when all are done to an optimum degree. When I first moved here 42 years ago, I was only a concept in my parents' mind at the time. I thought, my Lord, you know, we have 7 school districts in the Santa Clarita Valley. How unseemly, how bizarre. And then, over the years, when attempts to unify those districts happened and all failed, and the advocates for the unification were voted out of office, I began slowly, like the movement of a melting glacier, to understand the justification for 7 school districts. And now, whenever I see the way they really work, yes, they have 7 buildings, they have 7 boards, they have 7 principals, but there's a reason that benefits the kids and the parents. That is that they control what is happening in their immediate neighborhood. I have a question about government's issues. Who prepared the questions and the assumptions for the demographic study we've witnessed this evening? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Okay, Mr. Thune? Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Roy Thon. My question was simple, but I'll expand upon it. My question was what happens to Valencia Water Company as a private entity? But really what I mean to talk to is the comments that Maria had brought up early on the transparency and open budget process. I mean, that's why we're here. We want to talk about the governance process, and that's what I'm most interested in. I know whatever happens, we will have safe and reliable water because that's the charge that you all have in front of you. So I don't have any concerns about that. I expect that that's what we will always have regardless of what our formal governance process ends up being. But I do have concerns as to what the governance process itself will look like, regardless of the number of districts or directors. And I use Valencia Water Company as my primary example because I do live in Valencia Water Company's district as it stands now. And it is disturbing. You've heard comments regarding Valencia Water Company, the surcharge, the comments about the profit. And I think to the issue of governance, those are the types of things that I, as a customer and resident of Santa Clarita, just want to get understood. You know, if Valencia Water Company is going to be consumed into this district, but consumed as a private, continue to be as a private entity, what does that guaranteed profit look like? And that's a fundamental issue that I have, is that when we look at Valencia Water Company, because it stands out different from Castaic Lake or Newhall, because they don't disclose their financial information, they don't have to, and Castaic has chosen to not to do that. It leaves the customer and the consumer questioning, you know, what is really going on here. So regardless of what the final outcome is over the overall district and how it's structured, I think there needs to be that sense of transparency with regard to not just the governance, but with regard to the financial information that's provided. Castaic provides it. We can see what their funding is going to, where their budget is maintained, and what they're exactly doing. Valencia, you can't see that, and I've tried to see it, and they've been fair to say we don't disclose that to the public. So I just want to close with my point is, again, I have no issues one way or the other with respect to whether or not we end up with a unified Santa Clarita Water District. I think whatever provides safe and reliable water and continues to give us the transparency that we need and deserve, I'll be supportive of it. Whether it stays separate, I'm okay with that too. Again, as long as we have a transparent process that we can see what's going on and why. If there's going to be a guaranteed profit, we should understand why that's going to occur. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
You know, you're absolutely right. Valencia Water Company, Castaic owns the stock of. We don't operate the company, it's operated independently, but we own the stock of. I guess I could give you what kind of the vision is the vision would be it's the largest water company in the valley, that we would like it to be at some point a public agency just like the others, and that transparency be there. It's never had an elected board of directors, but at some point that's what we would like to see it be, as a part of that, to where it can be an elected board. This is just a vision for it at this point. And the reason that it's a vision is that it's under litigation right now. We were sued by the Santa Clarita Organization for Planning the Environment, and until that case is resolved, it will remain as a private organization. And then at some point, we're hoping that it can become a public agency. And so it's kind of a vision. At this point, we just own the stock. We would like to make it much more transparent once we actually operate the company, or this new entity operates the company. But that's kind of where it's at now.
The vision, I understand the driving force. same rules should apply to.
You're correct, and that's where we would like to head as elected officials. But until the litigation is settled, we don't operate it. We're away from it, and that as soon as that litigation is done, then I think that you would probably see changes to that organization.
One more comment on that.
Let's Mr. Campbell, then you.
please.
Sir.
If I could, please, I wanted to be a little more direct to your question about whether Valencia Water Company is part of the deal that we're discussing here. And I want to be clear that it is not. Castaic owns the stock and will continue to own the stock of a private entity throughout this. And whatever successor agency is developed as part of this process, that board will determine what happens to it. We do have to resolve the litigation, but once the litigation resolved, this new entity that we're discussing will be the one that makes that determination. And we can't make that determination in advance. We are prohibited at the moment from making it due to the litigation.
But the presumption would be one board.
That was the stated goal when it was acquired, was that we wanted to take what had always been a private entity owned by developers and bring it into the public realm, have elected officers, and have elected officials and public representation. That's still the agency's goal, and I suspect it will be our successor agency's goal as well.
We're going to move.
I just wanted to make the quick point, Mr. Thun, that never have the Valencia ratepayers owned their own water company and their own infrastructure, unlike Newhall County Water District, where our ratepayers own our we essentially own our own home. Valencia ratepayers have always been renters. And at the end of this process, it is certainly the goal of the Newhall County board members that I have spoken with to, for the first time, allow Valencia ratepayers to own their own home and elect their own representatives and govern their own water. So, for what it's worth.
Comment on the two maps. To echo Director Cooper, I personally like the proposed map number 2, which leaves the Newhall directors still representing most of our people, and in contrast, on proposed map 1, some of us would be in large areas that have never heard of us. So I'm in favor of proposed map 2. I don't think we're taking a position on it tonight, but I just wanted to get that statement out there for everyone. And then I guess just long-term or big picture on this process. I think you've seen tonight, this is pieces that we're still deciding on. I appreciate the presentation. I'm actually very interested in the financial items coming up. I mean, how we are going to make this work, if it works, and what we didn't say earlier is that if this doesn't work, if it doesn't make sense, we will not be going forward. All of us are interested in the best for our customers and for the valley, and this is very preliminary. And as these pieces are developed, you know, we're going to have a discussion each step of the way to see if, you know, this is the deal breaker or this is the deal maker. And there's a lot more of this to come. So thank you guys for following along with us.
Okay, other board? Mr. Pexi, do you have anything you'd like to add? What over there, Mr. Martin? Nothing? Mr. Kelly? Mr. Estacio? Gladback? Polly, welcome. By the way, I didn't see him. We can all be collectively jealous. Mr. DePremio is on vacation in Italy, so he won't be here tonight. Fine. Nothing? And Mrs. McMillan, okay? Want to add anything? Okay, I will add. I hope the public appreciates the process we're attempting here. We're basically making this, we've decided on some guiding principles, how we're going to treat each other, what are the important tenets of an ultimate agreement. We don't have an agreement. We're trying to get to that point, and we're looking at what the public has considered our priorities, governance being one of them. I am looking at this proposed map too, and I can tend to appreciate and agree with Director Gutzeit. It does seem to me to be an appropriate move in the right direction for this particular process. I have a question for Mr. Johnson. Where do you go? Back there? Okay. You mentioned the California Voting Rights Act, and there was particular attention paid to both maps to make sure that we were satisfying the requirements of that act, so we would not be subject to potential litigation should we go forward in either of these two directions. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So lessons learned from school districts and other cities and other entities that have been have suffered, I'll just say have suffered and paid huge legal fees to try and wade through that. That will have been taken care of should we choose either of these maps.
Yes, with the one kind of asterisk that if you do temporarily keep any at-large seats, you have a temporary risk. But once you're in pure division elections, either of these maps would equally address that concern.
Okay. Stay there for a second, please. I'm of the opinion, and maybe this will engender some discussion. In order to facilitate proper decision-making, I think this board ought to be small. 9, 7, 5. I can appreciate the inclusive nature of what we're trying to accomplish today. 14, if that's where we have to start, that's fine. But I think our goal should be, in 5 or 10 years, to shrink the size of this board from a governance structure perspective to something that's an odd number, smaller, 11 or smaller. I prefer 9 or even smaller than that if we can get there. That's my opinion. And I'd offer that for discussion.
I'd like to say that ad hoc, this has come up, and one of the reasons that's a benefit to a 3-division map is we could look at going to 9, and we had contemplated it at about 10 years out after the census and after the parties to any potential agreement, have settled out. We've gotten the management down. We have some continuity in directors, if they wish to stay, and certainly if people are leaving before then, that's fine too. But we had looked at a revisited about 10 years, but that was contemplated by the ad hoc.
Thank you. To me, it makes sense to have, maybe 9 is the right number, so you have 3 in each of 3 divisions. Maybe that's the right number. I just think in terms of making a decision, a set of board decisions, it's nicer to have an odd number than an even number. You end up having fewer stalemates, and if there are only 3 board directors running in each of 3 divisions, that's an easy gyration for you, right?
Yes, actually, if you go, as I talked about these, I talked about them as having 12. You could have a 13th board member from the county appointee. But yes, you could jump from 12 to 9 without having to change any of the lines, because then you'd go from 4 per division to 3 per division. You couldn't walk it down. You can't go 12 one year, 11 the next, 10 the next. You have to make the jump from 12 to 9, or you have to adjust the lines, because you'd be keeping an equal number of directors in each division. If you down the road want to go down to 7 or 3, we'd have to redraw the lines. But it's certainly an option at any point the board wishes to do so.
Well, with the exception of Directors McMillan and Goodside, none of us are spring chickens. I mean, we're not going to stay here forever. So I just think it just becomes easier to govern with 9, an odd number. Newhall County has 5, for example. City Council has 5. It just makes sense to me. No one wants to respond to that. Yeah, that's true. He must be 43 now.
I think, from my opinion, I think what's important to understand from the public standpoint, but also all the board members that have been involved in this, is it has been a very active discussion on many, many issues, and those issues have been coming out, and they've been discussed with the proper committees at that time, and then reported out to the boards. And the fact that we've come to a very compatible conclusion here, I think, is something that's extremely important. You're talking about 15 people, 14 people coming up with something for the future that is very exciting for me to see the direction that we're going.
Mr. Gladback.
Yes, in my travels as president of the Association of California Water Agencies and a director of the National Water Resources Association, I visited many water agencies and with different size of boards. And other, all due respect, Newhall County Water District, we have a good board now. But I've seen boards of 5 and 7 being very easy to flip and very not productive. I'm trying to find another word, but I mean stalemate.
Okay.
And I've seen this board at 7 members being totally ineffective.
Okay.
I followed this board since '73, and so I've seen it. And I think, 7 is too small.
Would 9 be the right number to you?
Well, my feeling of the problem with 9 is that when you get a committee, you got a committee of 4. I like to see committees of odd number, just like you want a board of odd number. I don't know how you get around the even number of 12, but
You could have a committee of 3.
yeah. But I think one of the benefits of Castaic Lake Water Agency, and with its committee structure, is that there's tremendous in-depth discussion at the committees. And when you have 5 members on a committee, you get a good cross-section of views. To me, if you get only 3 on a committee, you may or may not get good cross discussion. Open, what I mean, presenting different views. So those are my thoughts.
Okay. No other board discussion?
I will note that there's obviously costs involved. The larger board you have, there's, all the board the attendance at events, travel, a variety of costs associated with having a large board. And to the extent that you have any compassion for the general manager who is trying to satisfy horses pulling in 12 different directions. I think maybe it's a little more satisfying for a general manager to have a smaller board too. So, I mean, for those reasons, I do think a smaller board is. I haven't reached its size, but I do think a smaller board is advisable in the long run.
Good. Mr. Cooper.
I agree. I think getting it down to a manageable size is important. And I think you do it through time, is that you take the first structure and you get it down to 12 directors. At some point, you write that into the regulations that you're building, and then from there, then the board decides if you'd like to get it on down to 9 directors or whatever the number's going to be. but as a board that you make that decision and bring it on down. And you do it at election time, which is the appropriate time to do that, so that those positions drop off. I wondered if, at some point when you do this, if you had a division that, say, has 5 people in it, and if somebody resigns, if there's a method that you can put in there that says that director will not be replaced at that point. I don't know. Or you replace them with a temporary appointment until the next election, and then that position drops off back to 4. So I think there's some things that we need to investigate in how we do that as well.
Mr. Johnson, you have any experience with that?
Well, it's a little bit unique in that you're writing the legislation. So I have actually been talked about this quite a bit with your legal team and kind of handed off what I know to them, and they're being creative in investigating. You will run into issues with midterm. We talked a little bit about, especially when the census comes up and you're redrawing lines or when you're in the transition, you can, if someone resigns an at-large seat right now, you can appoint someone to finish that term who doesn't live in the division, so that they would finish that term and that would be it. They would be a temporary time. So there are some things you can do, but there's a lot of existing law about terms continue until they finish. So it is tough to cut them off midterm if someone resigns. It's easier to work on the second scenario Mr. Cooper was talking about of anticipating who may resign, and then that seat goes away at the next election time, and you may appoint a temporary placeholder. But yes, we've been talking about that a lot, and there are lots of, given that you have this kind of unique flexibility in the approach, there are some options that other jurisdictions would not have, certainly.
So clearly this has been a consideration, Mr. Bunn and Mr. Byrne. Would you care to comment, or would you rather remain silent? They're attorneys, sorry.
They've got to talk first.
Yeah.
I'm Tom Bunn. I'm the attorney for Newhall. Yes, we have discussed it extensively, both in committee and with the staff. Point out that if you just have that attrition that you're talking about, it's hard to make it come equally from all the divisions so that you end up with the right number in the right divisions. So I think there has to be some other process than strictly attrition. I think you're going to need to get and what we were talking about was the new board of the new entity making the determination of when to go from, say, 12 to 9 or 13 to 9. That's not something that we necessarily have to determine in advance when exactly that's going to happen.
We'll add, drawing on advice I give to other jurisdictions is, if a board member is 100% certain that they're not going to run again and is ready to announce that, that simplifies things. But if you're 99% certain you're not going to run again, don't announce it, because we'll write it so that it's locked. We'll make it 100%.
Yeah,
so,
right.
So if you're 100% certain you're not running again, let the staff know, and that'll simplify things. If you're 99% certain, stay quiet, and we'll work with what we can.
Mr. Byrne?
Yeah, I would agree with Tom and with Doug, and I would just say that obviously what the boards decide to do will inform us to figure out how to do that. But I think Doug has been excellent, and I think there's ways to do it which are very fair and also respectful of a good process. So I think there's some work to be done as well, but we're looking at it very seriously and considering all the input that board members are getting and providing you with the multiple scenarios.
Thank you.
And it's important to stay away from an at-large position. If we can be
agree.
all
Yeah.
districts, I think that's very important.
I, in my opinion, those 9 should all be elected. That's where I like to see us go. Nobody at large on the new board. New agency, new management, new way to do business.
Yeah, I think in the discussions we've had, when you're down to 12 or 9 or whatever number you end up at, it would be all by division. I think the only thought of keeping anyone at large is part of this transition, because it's easier to keep someone at large and then have that at large seat go away than to try to juggle division numbers in the short term.
And if you're thinking,
Go ahead.
if you're thinking about an odd number, as you mentioned before, First of all, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with an even number of directors. I think especially at that level when you have 12, you're not going to have very many deadlocks. But if you wanted to have an odd number during a transition, then a natural way to do it, as Mr. Johnson already suggested, is you take those 12 and you add the 1 from District 36. And that's an odd number board for the transition.
Anything further from the board?
Mr. Eckert?
Yes, sir.
The city of Santa Clarita was sued over the California voting rights. And that all who are governed
So they remain at large is what you're saying?
as it has been for 28 years.
Let me clarify a little bit. I was actually the expert for the city on that.
Okay.
They didn't win in court. They settled, and they settled to go to cumulative voting, and then the judge threw out that cumulative voting option.
What is cumulative voting?
Cumulative voting is where if there's 3 seats open, everyone gets 3 votes, just like at large, but they can cast them all for 1 person.
Okay.
So it's a kind of single shot voting on steroids.
Okay.
And the city attorneys did a good job writing the settlement, and the plaintiff's attorneys didn't really notice this until afterwards. But when the judge decided that cumulative voting wasn't allowed in general law cities, the settlement still stood. And the plaintiff still got $600,000. Or the plaintiff's attorney still got $600,000, which is why it wasn't that they prevailed on the merits. You're right, they did get to keep the at-large system, but it was more through good legal strategy than under prevailing on merits.
Also declared the system.
Yes.
Can somebody else come back and sue the city again? A different attorney, a different plaintiff?
Yes. And actually, the plaintiff's attorneys have declared they're going to find a new plaintiff and come back to the city again.
Yeah.
So. Not at all. No, and unfortunately, ideally, they would have won on the merits, and that would have set a nice precedent for all the jurisdictions within them. But that they didn't set any kind of precedent of safety at all, and they are still vulnerable.
Well, my point earlier was you've given this considered effort, and your proposal gives us your best shot at handling the California Voters' Rights Act in the new agency, should we get there.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Closing remarks? Oh, we have more questions? Go ahead, sir. By the way, what's your name for the record, please?
I'm Theodore Regino from New York County.
Okay.
Tesoro area.
Tesoro, okay.
Sound very tentative as to the number of board members, and I think a new agency will not be a transition agency. Why create a transition board? New agency, new board. Decide once and for all how many board members you should have, and use the map. That's not a transition board. It's not a transition agency.
Well, that's one point of view. I think, yeah, let's respond to that. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're trying to move as much as possible in this process through consensus, and as you can probably see, there is not consensus on that issue. So we're looking for places where we all agree, and we're attempting not to disrupt things where there is some level of vigorous disagreement, kind of a status quo on the areas where we have significant differences. So that hopefully that helps you understand kind of our thinking for some kind of a transitional process, leaving the door open to the board itself, reaching agreement and reducing that in time.
May I add to that, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Bunn, go ahead.
Just picture the negotiations that are happening. I think it's fair to say that everyone sitting at the table here wants to, if this new agency comes about, wants to have input on how that agency is put together. And the notion of getting 5 people to raise their hands and say, I will go off the board and not participate in this process, it just, and one of my roles is we're trying to settle a lawsuit here as well. And so we have to look at what's possible, and we explored a lot of solutions to try to get something that was possible. And that isn't it, to immediately reduce the boards.
Hopefully that explains it.
Agency is created.
The lawsuit that Newhall County Water District filed against Castaic will go away. There, as you heard tonight, there's another lawsuit pending that we have no control over.
Yeah, the agencies will no longer be at odds. I hope the audience appreciates the candor and openness we're offering here. I've not turned away any questions, and we won't. If you have a legitimate question, please ask. Okay, seeing none, we're going to move to closing remarks. Mr. Campbell?
Thank you. I just want to briefly address the ad hoc committee, the 2 directors that we've brought together from each of our respective boards, and thank them for the efforts that they've made. You can see there's been a lot of thought, time, effort, energy putting into getting us to where we are, finding the common ground, and I do appreciate that. And for the public, I do appreciate those that have an open mind and that can see the vision and the goal of integrated water resource management. That is the direction of the water industry in the future, and I'd like us to be part of that. So thank you.